John F. Kennedy, 35th President of the United States, the first Catholic and youngest elected at 43. He is such an icon that it's amazing to think he was only president for 3 years. He was born in 1917, second of 9 children to Joseph and Rose Kennedy. Now, Father Joseph was wealthy, president of a bank, real estate. He was a bootlegger during Prohibition, stock market investor, and Broadway and movie producer. There was a very Catholic family. Now, little John Kennedy, or Jack as they called him, felt a little neglected. His mother didn't really hug or coddle her children, and his father had high hopes for the oldest son, Joseph. Jack was so sickly that one time doctors misdiagnosed him with leukemia. They were wrong. But he broke out in hives, once needed an appendectomy. And then later on he developed Addison's disease, a disruption of the adrenal glands. Jack studied at Princeton and Harvard. His father became ambassador to England. Now Jack ruptured a disc playing football. It was terrible. But he wrote his thesis, Why England Slept, which was later published. When World War II broke out, Jack joined the Navy. His father had to pull some strings because he was so sickly. His older brother Joseph joined too. And around that time, in the next couple of years, began what people call the Kennedy curse, disaster after disaster. Joseph Jr. was a pilot during World War II. His plane exploded someplace over Europe. He was the first to go. He was only 29 years old. Now, Jack's sister Kathleen lost a husband in the war. He was killed by a sniper. She later got engaged, but her mother didn't approve of her fiancé. Well, she married him anyway, a man named Harrington. Soon afterwards, they died in a plane crash, and her mother did not attend the funeral. Then there was Jack's sister Rosemary. She was slow in learning. Her father thought she was retarded. She had tantrums, angry outbursts. Her father was a bit embarrassed by her. When she was 21 years old, her father thought that having her get a lobotomy would help her with her angry outbursts. Instead, it was a disaster. She became lethargic. She wasn't able to speak. He put her in an institution, pretty much never visited her, nor told the family what institution she was in. She was sexually abused while she was there. It was after Joseph Sr.'s death that the family reached out to help Rosemary. She was helped by very kind nuns, especially her sister Eunice would lend a hand. Now in this photo you can see John F. Kennedy Jr. and his sister Caroline. Well, Rosemary died in 2005 at the age of 86. Back to Jack Kennedy and World War II. Now, Jack Kennedy commanded a PT boat, the PT-109. He was ordered, along with a convoy, to intercept a Japanese fleet of ships. Now, no one knows how it happened, and some blame his inexperience or incompetence, but a Japanese destroyer rammed into the PT-109 and cut it in two. 2 men were killed. Everybody yelled. They jumped in the water. They hung onto the hull. Flames fueled on top of the water. They bobbed on top of the ocean until the next afternoon. Then they took a 4-mile swim to an island. Jack swam with an injured man strapped to his back. Then they swam to another island for coconuts, and days later they were finally rescued. Jack was awarded the Purple Heart. He returned to command another boat, but he became too sickly. His back, his ruptured disc was giving him so much trouble. He got surgery, but even that didn't work. Finally, they started giving him cortisone. It was around this time that he was hit with Addison's disease. He got a fever of 106, and it put him in a coma. Shortly afterward, he began dating Inga Arvad, a Danish girl, but his father did not approve. Neither did anybody else. Maybe it was her friendship with Hitler that was a problem. Since Jack's older brother Joseph had died, his father set his sights on him. Jack became a young congressman, and then he became a senator. In 1952, Jack met Jacqueline Bouvier. They were both Catholic. She was part of his social circle. They hit it off, they fell in love, and about a year or so later they got married. Now, they did have some difficulties in the early years of their marriage, part of it being Jack's health. He had a couple of more surgeries, and then Jacqueline suffered a miscarriage or two and had one stillborn daughter named Arabella. So things were not good, but at the same time, one of the main obstacles was Jack's continuous infidelity. Jack one time said that if he didn't have sex once a day, he would get headaches. The list of Jack's conquests, well, is legendary. Many have heard of the actresses like Angie Dickinson and Tierney. There were many starlets and Hollywood beauties, but the most legendary, the most famous was Marilyn Monroe. This went on for years. There was also Judith Exner, who happened to be the mistress of a gangster, Sam Giancana. One was a possible spy, Ellen Rometsch, burlesque dancer Blaze Starr, Swedish socialite Gulina von Post, a couple of secretaries that he called Fiddle and Faddle, and a young little intern named Mimi Alford. Some say that countless medication for his back pain due to the botched surgeries increased his sexual drive, who knows, but he was taking amphetamines and painkillers. He also took steroids for his Addison's disease, antispasmodic for his colitis, antibiotics for his urinary tract infections, antihistamines for his allergies. Some of these medications deteriorated the bones and possibly would have brought osteoporosis. After suffering a few miscarriages and having a stillborn child, Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy and her husband John F. Kennedy finally had their first child, Caroline, born in 1957. Sweet Caroline. 3 years later, in 1960, she was pregnant again. Then came 1960, the year that Senator John F. Kennedy decided to run for president. He chose as his running mate Lyndon Baines Johnson to be his vice presidential candidate. They ran against the Republican candidate Richard Nixon. It was proving to be a very close election. Nixon and Kennedy decided to have the first televised debate. And, well, Kennedy looked good on television. Nixon sweated. He kind of blended into the background. While Kennedy, well, he handled that social media. Funny thing is, people that heard it on the radio thought that Nixon had won. But on television, Kennedy came across as youthful and dominant. And, well, Kennedy won. And then right after that, well, shortly after that, Kennedy and Jackie had their first son, John F. Kennedy Jr., or John John, as everybody called him. Tragically, John John would grow up to die in a plane crash at the age of 38. But back to 1960, John F. Kennedy became the youngest elected president of the United States. He will be inaugurated in January. He chose his brother Robert to be the Attorney General. And well, in 1960, they were sitting on top of the world. Little did they know that in about 8 years, both of them would be dead. But that will continue in part 2. For the moment, this is Cool Talk.